Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having an interest in my channel, and thank you for subscribing. Today's live was a dud. Oh well, whatever. You can catch up to it later. I told my one story I wanted to say, and So, when Jenjin came onto our property, let me describe where our property was. So we had approximately 14 3/4 acres. 3 acres was in county, and the rest was in city. We had 2 filbert farms on either side of us that ran the length of our 10-acre, 12-acre field. And then we had houses in front of us. They were kind of like tract homes from the 60s-ish, 50s. Nice places. And then behind us, we had kind of, farmland, rural. The place directly behind us had large acreage, so they had horses. So, we weren't out in the deep woods when Jenjin, the Oma female, came to our property. I was almost, I was like 4.5 when she initially came to the property. And when we first found her, it was because she'd been up one of our oak trees over in our oak grove on the other side of our 10-acre field, screaming her head off, bloody murder, like a woman getting killed. My dad assumed that somebody was attacking a human female in the border of our property, so he and I and my mother, with flashlights and, armed, went over to investigate, see what was going on. Mom hung back because, she had to run to the house if we needed to make a phone call. No cell phones then. Had to actually use a rotary phone. So my dad and I stayed behind because Mom realized, it's just, Oma up the tree. So she was sitting probably 80 feet up one of our trees on a limb, screaming. When we put our bullseye lamps on her, because that's what Dad brought, she looked down at us. She kind of like, a little startled. But she didn't go anywhere. She didn't jump down. She didn't freak out. She didn't crawl out of the tree. And Dad went, oh, well, one of those. Let's go back to the house because we don't want to bother her. And that was probably in June. I was 4, so that'd have been 68. So it took her 2 months, almost 3. I had created my, my little fort out of blackberries, and it was during that time that she decided to move into it. But before that, I would see her crossing between the homes across the road in front of our house, and we sat probably a 1/4 acre back into our property. And my father's mother's home was right at the front edge of our property, maybe 20 feet off the road. And this was a rural, we were between 2 rural roads. So she'd pass between the neighbors' homes right in front of my father's mother's house. She would use one of the neighbors' fences as a blind so that people going up and down the road wouldn't see her cross. She'd wait for traffic. She'd wait until they'd passed, and then she'd hop across the road. She'd get into my grandmother's front yard, and she would pick apples off the tree. I'd see her silhouetted eating apples, because my bedroom window looked across our 3.5-acre field straight into my grandmother's home, her front yard and her side yard next to the road. So I could clearly see it at night. And we did have some road lamps near that area. So I'd watch her eat apples. Once she was done eating apples, that would take, 5-10 minutes. Then she'd come down the road, because we had a access road to our grinding room where we ground our mink food. And we had our freezer and that sort of thing. And then we went, we had mink yard behind that. Bunch of buildings. Because we had like 10,000 mink at one point in time on our ranch. When I was a kid, it was more like 4,000 to 6,000. So she would go down our little access road, and then she'd cut into the blackberries where I'd made my fort. And that's kind of how she started inhabiting my fort. Evidently what I had done behavioral-wise looked really good to her, so she decided, instead of staying up on the mountainside, because she was going through a marriage turnout, she couldn't marry inside of her group. She didn't have anything that wasn't related to her. There were no people in her clan area or in her band area, because her mother was a chieftainess. She was a chief. So they had a lot of marriage ties, over 200 marriage ties with, you know, other cryptids in the Northwest. So it was very difficult for Jenjin to find a mate. There were a lot of, you know, cousins. You know, you can't marry cousins. They understand you cannot marry cousins because they understand deformities come with cousins. So she was on a marriage turnout, which is a common practice for them. So they go, you know, you've got a first daughter that can't marry, or even a you know, last in a line daughter. Jenjin was the first daughter, so she was destined to become chieftainess. So she had to marry, and it had to be a good marriage where the offspring would not be, you know, in jeopardy of having malformations because of, you know, bad genetics. So her family turned her out so that she could go find a husband. That's why she was on her ranch. That's why she was screaming. And unfortunately, one of the cryptids that she attracted, because she attracted several before the, you know, Gugwe showed up. There were two, maybe three. Two that I saw, a third that we heard, because one of them attacked her before the Gugwe. And then, you know, the Gugwe showed up. And then I had to take her place, you know, screaming in her place to try to call a mate once I understood that her larynx had been broken. The Gugwe had strangled her one night when he was molesting her. Broke her larynx so she couldn't scream for a mate or help. Because customarily at that point, she has to marry to get out of the situation. There is no other recourse for her. Once the attack has occurred and she's been enslaved, because that's what the Gugwe do. They delay you and they enslave you. They keep you where you cannot leave. And that's the danger of Sunface people, Gugwe, and the Redbone people. They will inhibit you from leaving once they've captured you. And that is exactly what this Gugwe did to her. He essentially trapped her for the last year and a half. Potentially a year and a half. I mean, last 6-8 months, definitely, he had trapped her completely in our little stand of oak trees. She couldn't leave without, you know, him trying to attack us. So she kind of, in that last 6-8 months, stood guard over our family while I tried to, you know, bring her water, bring her food, and taunt that Gugwe and scream for a mate for her, so that she could maybe be, you know, saved from what was happening to her. So that is a cultural difference we modern people aren't familiar with, but indigenous people, you know, the captured bride, the enslaved bride, you know, that's all common in indigenous culture. We understand that. We know what that is. We're aware. Enemy tribes capture.